Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Wednesday, 18th June 25, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Iran. The conflict between Iran and Israel has escalated, causing significant internal disruption. Israeli strikes, including those targeting weapons production facilities, have resulted in explosions and smoke in Tehran, causing hundreds of casualties, including civilians. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a recorded address from a bunker, vowed to stand firm against Israeli aggression. He warned the U.S. against direct military intervention, threatening irreparable damage if attacked. Khamenei, Iran's leader for over 3 decades since 1939, has backed proxy groups to expand Iranian influence in the Middle East. Internet and phone service within Iran are now unreliable, with state television urging people to delete WhatsApp due to alleged data sharing with Israel. Iran claimed to have shot down an Israeli Hermes 900 drone and detained 5 suspected Mossad agents for allegedly tarnishing the country's image online. The online world is crucial for young Iranians, offering support during the war. The potential collapse of the Iranian regime would be a major setback for Russia, potentially leading to the loss of a key strategic partner for Moscow. Despite efforts at positive messaging, Kremlin officials are facing a new reality of heightened threats to Iran. Hundreds of Chinese nationals have been evacuated from Iran, with efforts continuing to remove more than 1,000 others due to the conflict with Israel. Israel has conducted strikes on Iran, initially targeting nuclear sites. But the possibility of regime change is now openly discussed. The Israeli military reported attacking with more than 50 planes overnight, focusing on weapons production facilities. Israel maintains it does not target Iranian civilians. Israelis have been seen gathering near the water in Herzliya, while Israeli military vehicles are positioned along the border with the Gaza Strip. Despite facing a no-confidence vote, the confrontation with Iran has united Israel's political factions. United States. President Donald Trump has presented conflicting stances on the conflict between Iran and Israel, fluctuating between advocating for a swift diplomatic resolution and suggesting potential U.S. intervention. He stated he was undecided on involving the U.S. in Israel's war. Trump directly threatened Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, stating the U.S. knows his location but has no immediate plans to take him out. He demanded Iran's unconditional surrender, but also stated an Iran deal could still happen, and claimed Iran was a few weeks away from a nuclear weapon. Trump has considered strikes against Iran only if the bunker buster bomb would guarantee destruction of the uranium enrichment facility at Fordo. Trump's consideration of military intervention has divided his party and supporters, with some Republican allies disagreeing with his isolationist tendencies. U.S. officials indicated the next 24 to 48 hours would be critical. U.S. intelligence and Israel disagree on the status of Iran's nuclear program. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu claims Iran is marching very quickly toward a nuclear weapon, while U.S. intelligence asserts Iran suspended its nuclear weapons program decades ago. Allies or proxies of Iran are expected to resume attacks on U.S. ships in the region if the United States joins Israel's campaign. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is expected to face sharp questions from Congress regarding his tenure, opposition to women in combat jobs, and efforts to shift funding from troop housing to border security. Russia. The potential collapse of the Iranian regime would be a serious blow for Russia, risking the loss of a key strategic partner for Moscow. President Vladimir Putin has commented on the conflict between Iran and Israel, NATO, and the war in Ukraine. Pakistan. The Israel-Iran conflict could trigger new security and economic challenges for Pakistan, which is already grappling with militancy, separatism, and economic instability. France. According to French President Macron, Israel's strikes on Iran began with nuclear sites, but Torkov and #39, regime change and #39, is now out in the open. Israel has broadened its strategy from containment to direct assault, conducting brazen attacks on major nuclear and military facilities in Iran, including those confirmed by the UN's nuclear watchdog through satellite imagery. These strikes have particularly affected Tehran, a densely populated city, leading to filled shelters, communication difficulties, empty streets, and closed businesses, with hundreds of thousands facing evacuation warnings. In response, Iran has claimed to have fired hypersonic missiles Fatah 1 at Israel, which travel at speeds exceeding Mach 5 and possess advanced maneuverability to evade air defenses. The Israeli military reported losing a drone in Iran, downed by a surface-to-air missile, with no reported injuries or information breaches. The conflict has prompted international concern, with UN Chief Antonio Guterres calling for an immediate ceasefire. Wealthy Gulf countries are alarmed, and Israel's actions are further alienating potential Arab allies. Turkish President Erdogan stated that Iran has a legitimate right to self-defense following what he described as a terrorist act by Israel, which he noted possesses nuclear weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Israel has given assurances regarding the safety of Russian personnel at the Russian-built Iranian nuclear site in Bushehr. A parallel propaganda war is taking place alongside the physical strikes. The U.S. is considering its role in the escalating conflict. President Trump has expressed that his patience with Iran has run out, though negotiation remains possible, and has stated the U.S. should support Israel but not join the war, advocating for an end to the conflict to prevent a disastrous escalation. Despite approving an attack on Iran, Trump held back, awaiting Tehran's response to demands to abandon its nuclear program, reflecting indecisiveness on the matter. He claims Iran is defenseless. Senate Republicans largely support Trump's handling of the conflict and trust his judgment, while the MAGA base is split. Iran's leader has warned of irreparable consequences if the U.S. launches strikes, threatening us troops in the Middle East. If the U.S. joins Israeli attacks, Iran has stated it will retaliate wherever we find the targets, according to Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Majid Takhravanchi. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem has issued its first announcement for Americans trying to leave Israel. Amid the Israel-Iran conflict, the situation in Gaza remains dire. Killings continue, and concerns are escalating about the failing food distribution system managed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Desperate Palestinians seeking food have faced attacks by Israeli forces at food sites. Israeli gunfire and strikes have killed at least 140 people across Gaza in the past 24 hours, according to local health officials. Emma Graham Harrison, The Guardian's chief Middle East correspondent, reports on the ongoing crisis in Gaza. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer chaired an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the UK's response to the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. The UK government's approval is required for the US to use its Diego Garcia base for any potential bombing raid on Iran, raising concerns about potential U.S. intervention in the Middle East. Southeast Asian nations are urging their citizens to evacuate from Iran and Israel. Malaysia has warned of rapidly deteriorating conditions, while Thailand is preparing to repatriate tens of thousands of migrant laborers from Israeli farms and factories. Approximately 150 Filipinos in Israel have requested assistance from Manila to return, although most of the 30,000-strong Filipino community, primarily domestic workers and carers, are hesitant to leave their wards. Amid the conflict, a goods train from China arrived at a dry port near Tehran, marking the first delivery under the new China-Iran Rail Corridor project. Tensions in the Middle East have escalated, with Russia warning that direct US military assistance to Israel could destabilize the region. Russia's SVR Foreign Intelligence Service described the situation as critical, while the US closely monitors the potential for a wider war. The US is considering military involvement in Israel's strikes against Iranian nuclear sites, though President Trump's stance remains uncertain. Prime Minister Modi addressed the issue of the ceasefire with Pakistan to US President Donald Trump during a lengthy phone call, marking the first time Modi has raised the contentious issue with Trump. The U.S. Federal Reserve has kept interest rates unchanged amid economic uncertainty, despite President Trump's criticism. The Supreme Court upheld a Tennessee law barring gender-affirming care for youth, limiting access to puberty blockers. The fate of TikTok in the United States is uncertain, despite the Trump administration granting ByteDance a 90-day extension to find a non-Chinese buyer. President Trump is expected to sign an executive order to keep TikTok running in the U.S. Foreign students will be required to unlock their social media profiles for us diplomats to review before receiving educational and exchange visas, with suspicion arising from failures to comply or indications of hostility toward American values. Nippon Steel has acquired us steel for $14.90 billion, a deal that allows us President Donald Trump to appoint a board member. Chinese e-commerce giant JD.com plans to secure stablecoin licenses globally to reduce cross-border transaction costs. The claim that the $499 Trump mobile tone smartphone is proudly designed and built in the United States is being doubted by analysts who suggest the manufacturer is likely based in Asia. A heat dome is expected to bring fierce temperatures and humidity to much of the U.S., affecting the Midwest and the East Coast. Experts anticipate a brain drain in American universities this summer due to funding cuts and attacks on academic freedom. Historians Timothy Snyder and Marcy Shaw are leaving Yale University for the University of Toronto, citing concerns over American democracy. Turning to Mexico, the Trump administration has imposed new sanctions on a Mexican cartel for its role in the murder of a TikTok influencer and the fentanyl trade. Economic sanctions have also been imposed on 5 high-ranking members of Mexico's Jalisco New Generation cartel for drug trafficking and killings. Following a school shooting in Graz, Austria, where a gunman killed 10 people, the Austrian government announced proposals to tighten rules on gun purchases by raising the minimum age and calling for more psychological screening. In the United Kingdom, a British police force has apologized to the family of teenage motorcyclist Harry Dunn, who was killed by a U.S. government employee driving on the wrong side of the road. Finally, Michigan wildlife experts removed a large lid stuck around a black bear's neck after 2 years. The bear survived and was able to feed itself despite the uncomfortable accessory. China is navigating a complex economic landscape as Premier Li Qiang has urged Jiangsu province to enhance technology, trade, and consumption to stimulate growth. There are concerns about the overreach of China's austerity campaign at the local level. Despite export controls, China's AI sector is advancing, highlighted by DeepSeek's new AI model. The innovative drug industry is showing signs of recovery, driven by cross-border licensing deals. China's STAR market will again allow unprofitable companies to list, supporting high-tech and strategic sectors. Access to China's derivatives markets is expanding for qualified foreign investors who can trade ETF options onshore from October 9, 2025 for hedging. Chinese investors are turning to gold amid expectations of rising prices. The head of China's central bank has indirectly criticized the US dollar's dominance. Chinese automakers like Boeing are increasing sales in Europe, especially Italy, following the EU's higher tariffs on Chinese EVs, doubling their market share. As the U.S. market becomes less accessible, Chinese goods are increasingly exported to Southeast Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Many smaller Chinese firms are participating in the Paris Air Show, while European countries are being urged to pursue critical minerals autonomy to reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains. Regarding international relations, China is likely to be cautious about intervening in the Israel-Iran conflict, even if the U.S. becomes involved, and is expected to play a role in brokering a ceasefire, though its influence may be limited. China has warned its citizens to leave Iran and Israel due to the ongoing security situation. Videos on Chinese social media suggest preparations for a major military parade for the 80th anniversary of Victory Day in September. Advancements in the radar of China's J-20 stealth fighter are attributed to semiconductor scientist Xu Xianggang. China has successfully conducted the first test flight of its next-generation Menju crewed spacecraft, including a zero-altitude escape trial. In domestic news, a river overflowed in Guangdong province, causing evacuations, while workers are sorting AI data in severance-like conditions in Xinjiang. Turning to the United States, President Trump is expected to extend the deadline for ByteDance to divest TikTok's U.S. business or face a ban. The U.S. has deployed an aircraft carrier and fighter aircraft to the Middle East, redeploying assets from the South China Sea. India is working to mend strained relations with Canada, agreeing to restore diplomatic services nearly 2 years after accusations of involvement in the killing of a Sikh separatist leader in British Columbia led to diplomatic tension. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney at the G7 summit, where Carney pledged to restore diplomatic relations despite ongoing accusations from Canadian intelligence regarding India's increased repression efforts. India is also investigating the deadly Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad, involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which killed at least 290 people, and prompted scrutiny of Boeing's safety record and a review of Air India's Boeing fleet, leading to flight disruption. Over 200 victims have been identified, and investigations are examining the plane's last resort ram air turbine function. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, the sole survivor of the Air India crash in Diu, helped carry his brother's coffin to the crematorium, and demand for seat a lavina on Air India flights has surged. India distanced itself from a Shanghai Cooperation Organization CO statement denouncing Israel's attacks on Iran, reflecting its intricate diplomatic ties with both nations. The SCO, chaired by China, has 10 members focusing on economic and security cooperation. Additionally, 2 Indian students were sentenced for involvement in multi-million-dollar fraud schemes targeting elderly Americans, defrauding at least 25 victims with an intended loss of $2,694,156. Former President Donald Trump reiterated his claim that he prevented a war between India and Pakistan, both nuclear powers, following a phone call with Narendra Modi. Boeing is facing increased scrutiny after the Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad, which involved a Boeing 787 Dreamliner and resulted in 290 deaths, prompting a review of Air India's Boeing fleet by Indian regulators. Boeing maintained a subdued presence at the Paris Air Show, while experiencing its best sales month in a year and a half. Canada is attempting to repair diplomatic relations with India, which was strained after accusations of Indian involvement in the killing of a Sikh separatist leader in British Columbia. Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Narendra Modi at the G7 summit and pledged to restore diplomatic relations despite ongoing accusations from Canadian intelligence. Both countries have agreed to restore diplomatic services nearly 2 years after the initial dispute. In the United States, 2 Indian students were sentenced for their involvement in multi-million-dollar fraud schemes targeting elderly Americans, defrauding at least 25 victims with an intended loss of $2,694,156. Former President Donald Trump repeated his claim that he stopped a war between India and Pakistan following a phone call with Narendra Modi. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, said by China and comprising 10 members focused on economic and security cooperation, issued a statement denouncing Israel's attacks on Iran, from which India distanced itself. Russia's President Vladimir Putin downplayed concerns regarding NATO's increased defense spending, stating Russia is capable of ensuring its own security. Putin engaged in discussions with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan about the Israel-Iran conflict, urging an immediate end to hostilities. He signaled willingness to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and is open to engaging with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Following an assault on an EU official in Vladivostok, the European Union summoned Russia's envoy to Brussels. The annual St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, a key event for attracting foreign investment, continues to showcase Russian technology and business. Reinforcing their partnership, North Korea is deploying military builders and sappers to assist in the restoration of Russia's Kursk region after an incursion by Ukraine, adding to its existing labor force in the country. In Ukraine, a Russian missile strike on Kyiv tragically killed 28 and injured over 130, devastating a 9-story apartment building. The war in Ukraine has given NATO a renewed sense of purpose, with the organization planning a key summit in The Hague next week to discuss increasing defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product. The European Union has stated firmly that it will not resume importing gas from Russia and has unveiled plans to eliminate fossil fuel imports from Russia entirely by 2028. Australia is seeing new energy regulations designed to protect consumers from unfair pricing practices. These regulations will limit price increases and protect vulnerable customers. However, the Q's World University rankings show declines for several of Australia's top universities. In executive compensation news, the CEO of News Corp is the highest-paid CEO of an Australian-listed company, highlighting a significant disparity between CEO and average worker salaries. Turning to legal matters in Australia, Erin Patterson has denied charges of murder and attempted murder linked to a fatal lunch she served. Meanwhile, in Bali, Indonesia, several Australians face severe penalties for their alleged involvement in the murder of an Australian man. In another tragic event in Australia, the death of a biomedical student was partly attributed to a delayed ambulance, prompting concerns about emergency response times. United Kingdom's Strathmore Foods drew fire from the UK advertising authority for a TV ad that stereotyped older people negatively. Clothes from well-known UK brands like Next and Marks and Spencer, discarded by consumers, were found in a Ghana rubbish dump in protected wetlands, a discovery made by unearthed reporters and Greenpeace Africa. In other news, Sex Matters, a UK gender-critical group, is threatening legal action against the Scottish Government over delays in implementing the UK Supreme Court's ruling on biological sex across public bodies. The group is demanding new policies and guidance to align with the ruling that the legal definition of a woman in the Equality Act, 2010, excludes transgender women with gender recognition certificates. A member of the Kneecap rap group also faced court in the UK on a terrorism charge for waving a Hezbollah flag, drawing a crowd of hundreds of supporters. Shifting focus to the G7, leaders committed to backing Ukraine, though a unified condemnation of Russia was absent. This summit took place during Mr. Trump's absence, due to the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict. Mexico braced for impact as Hurricane Eric swiftly escalated into a Category 3 storm, doubling its power in under 24 hours. President Claudia Sheinbaum urged residents in vulnerable zones to evacuate. Meanwhile, some families near the U.S. border continue to cross into Mexico for cheaper groceries, even as inflation eases slightly in the U.S. Turning to the United States, the Senate confirmed Rodney Scott as CBP Commissioner in a contentious 51-46 vote. The confirmation proceeded despite allegations of a cover-up by Scott related to the death of a detainee at the border. New Zealand's suspension of over $18 million in development assistance to the Cook Islands marks a significant shift in their relationship. This action follows the Cook Islands' recent partnership agreements with China, raising concerns for New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters regarding the agreement's scope. As the Cook Islands' largest funder, New Zealand will maintain the funding pause until the diplomatic climate improves, a move the Cook Islands Prime Minister acknowledged awareness of. Turning to New Zealand itself, the government has approved the medicinal use of psilocybin, a hallucinogenic compound present in magic mushroom. Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour announced the rule changes that enabled this approval. The United States is enhancing its visa application process for students and scholars, resuming FM and J non-immigrant visa processing with increased scrutiny of applicants' social media. Consular officials will be looking for posts indicating hostility towards the U.S. or its values. Furthermore, voices are calling on U.S. senators to push NATO allies to elevate their military spending to exceed 3.5% of GDP in the coming years. Indonesia is grappling with volcanic activity as Mount Luatobe, Laki-Laki's repeated eruptions have forced evacuations and disrupted air travel, including flights to Bali. Meanwhile, Indonesian police are investigating the death of an Australian tourist in Bali, with 3 suspects currently in custody. South Korea's Dongkwon Circus Troupe, a century-old institution, now stands as the nation's sole surviving traditional circus. Access to some buildings within the Blue House will be limited from mid-July as the new president finalizes relocation plans. In Seoul, former First Lady Kim Keon-hee is hospitalized, reportedly battling severe depression. This hospitalization occurs amid escalating pressure surrounding a special counsel inquiry into alleged improprieties during her husband's tenure, including stock manipulation, bribery, and election interference allegation. Pakistan's army chief recently met with then U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. This meeting occurred amidst ongoing tensions with India. Speculation also arose regarding potential U.S. involvement in the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. Specifically, discussion centered on possible attacks on Iran's nuclear program. Adding to the regional instability, footage surfaced showing Pakistani citizens being evacuated from Iran. These citizens were fleeing the country due to the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. The border closures further complicated the evacuation efforts. United States. In the United States, the debate over abortion rights continues to intensify. A federal judge upheld an Idaho law that bans abortions performed because of genetic abnormalities in a fetus, a move celebrated by anti-abortion groups. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is grappling with rising inflation, with the Federal Reserve considering further interest rate hikes to curb price increases. The administration is also facing criticism over its handling of the border situation, as migrant crossings continue to pose a significant challenge. Canada. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced new measures to address the housing crisis, including investments in affordable housing and incentives for first-time home buyers. The Canadian government is also facing pressure to increase its defense spending to meet NATO targets, amidst growing global security concerns. Furthermore, discussions continue around indigenous reconciliation and addressing historical injustices. Cambodia has banned the import of fruits and vegetables from Thailand, intensifying a trade dispute. This action follows heightened tensions and a brief exchange of fire at the border in May. The skirmish resulted in the death of a Cambodian soldier. Demonstrating national solidarity, tens of thousands marched in Phnom Penh to support the government and military. Hungary is facing increased scrutiny as dozens of members of the European Parliament, MEPs, plan to attend the Budapest Pride March on June 28. Their presence is a show of solidarity with gay Hungarians. This action defies Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who has tried to ban the event. The controversy stems from a Hungarian law, ostensibly for child protection, that may be used to ban Budapest Pride. EU lawmakers are pressing the European Union to pressure Hungary to allow LGBTQ events. Italy recently saw its Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, at the center of social media buzz after cameras captured her seemingly rolling her eyes. The speculation centered on whether the gesture was directed at French President Emmanuel Macron or former US President Donald Trump during the G7 summit. Shifting to France, President Emmanuel Macron has faced criticism from Trump, who accused Macron of seeking publicity. Trump also claimed Macron misunderstands US strategies related to the Israel-Iran conflict, adding that Macron always gets it wrong. Germany has seen the arrest of a 20-year-old man. He is suspected of using the internet for grooming and sexually abusing children. The suspect allegedly pressured a teenager in the United States to commit suicide. Turning to Japan, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier met with Emperor Naruhito. The meeting occurred at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. Democratic Republic of Congo is grappling with internal strife as its Minister of Justice stepped down following an investigation into the alleged misappropriation of $19 million. Simultaneously, in a move towards regional stability, representatives from Congo and Rwanda inked a preliminary peace accord in Washington, D.C., a development highlighted in a joint statement with the U.S. Department of State. Brazil is grappling with severe flooding in Rio Grande do Sul, where intense rainfall has tragically led to at least 2 deaths and forced 2,000 residents from their homes, as confirmed by the state's civil defense. Shifting focus to disease prevention, Brazil's unique geography may provide a natural defense against a bird flu outbreak comparable to the one experienced in the U.S., possibly by diverting migratory birds away from vulnerable poultry farming areas. New Zealand's rugby governing body has denied allegations about restrictive clauses in Super Rugby contracts. These clauses were said to prevent Pacific heritage players from representing their island nations. The Flying Fijians' head coach had implied some contracts require players to remain eligible for the All Blacks. United Kingdom mourns as Yvonne Ford from Barnsley, South Yorkshire, has died from rabies. She contracted the virus in Morocco. The UK Health Security Agency, GOCSA, confirmed the diagnosis in the Yorkshire and Humber region after her return from a February vacation. The infection resulted from contact with a stray dog during her holiday. This tragic event highlights the risks associated with animal contact abroad. United Kingdom is seeing growing pressure on Keir Starmer to proactively address pressing issues. Labour MPs are urging action, with some suggesting a renegotiation of the UK's relationship with Europe, a prospect that doesn't appeal to everyone. Furthermore, the UK seems poised to pursue reforms to the European Convention on Human Rights. Zambia is experiencing a delay in the return of the late former President Edgar Lungu's body from South Africa. This delay is due to a dispute between Lungu's family and the current Zambian leadership concerning the arrangements for his funeral. Peru's capital witnessed an unusual discovery as utility workers unearthed a 1,000-year-old pre-Inca mummy. The finding occurred during excavation work aimed at expanding the natural gas pipeline network, with the mummy located just half a meter beneath the surface. Croatia recently hosted Prime Minister Modi, who concluded his visit after engaging in discussions with Prime Minister Plenković and President Zoran Milanović. Their meetings focused on strategies to bolster bilateral relations across a range of sectors. Papua New Guinea faces calls for immediate electoral boundary reforms ahead of the 27 national general election. A new report highlights substantial violations of the law within the existing electoral system. Armenia has seen the arrest of one of its wealthiest citizens, who is now facing court proceedings. The charges relate to allegations of publicly inciting the illegal seizure of power amidst a growing conflict within the church. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.